Hi, I'm Rachel and I'm a yoga teacher and teacher trainer with Why Yoga. And in this next little tutorial, we're going to look at the history of yoga. So gather around, grab your mug of tea, and come around for like a fireside chat. So how old do you think that yoga is? Just in your mind, take a guess. So yoga goes back at least 3,000 years. And if we trace it all the way back to something called the Vedas, which you'll learn about in just a second, it could go back as much as 4,000, 6,000 years old, which is so amazing to think that we are a part of such a long-standing tradition. So to begin our story of yoga history, we have to start way back in something called the Indus Valley Civilization, which was one of the very first civilizations on the planet. And in this civilization, there were cities that were located along rivers, right? And this is when people were starting to settle down and build communities and have commerce. And into this society, the Vedas were created. Now, the Vedas were the very first Hindu texts. They were composed in Sanskrit, and they were these ecstatic kind of ritualistic chants that were performed by priests in order to maintain the natural order of things. So think of like, a shamanic ritual or nature rituals, or, oh, we praise the sun god, please give us rain so that our crops may grow. It was that kind of thing. And these ceremonies, these rituals, were performed by priests or Brahmins. So that's the beginning of yoga, or that's where some people trace yoga all the way back to. But here's the thing. There was a little bit of a problem with this idea in the society because people were starting to think, well, we have these rituals and there's this cause and this effect and we do these things and then other things happen and that's something called karma. And here I am and I'm milking my cow and I'm doing my thing and I'm fighting with my wife and I'm creating all of this karma. I'm creating this residue from this cycle of life. And it's like, I can't get it off me. What do I do with all this karma? I'm gonna have to keep coming back lifetime after lifetime to get rid of it. What do I do? And so at this point in history, some people started to leave society and go off into the woods and leave their wives and leave their cows and leave society and practice meditation. And so after the Vedas, we had this arrival of a new form of yoga, which was called the Upanishads. That's the name of the text. And in this form of yoga, people would meditate. They would go inside and they would meditate to find the truth. And this is where we really see some of the ideas from yoga today that we practice, such as meditation. We have ideas about the energetic body, which you might hear referred to in yoga like pranayama and prana and life energy and life force and things like that. So we start to see that, and that's about 3,000 years ago, just to position ourselves on the history timeline. So after that, we have something called the Epic Age. So keep in mind that now you have people practicing yoga, but in order to practice yoga, I gotta go off into the forest and I gotta renounce my wife and renounce my cow and I gotta meditate all day and I have to not eat very much and not have any babies. And so that was the kind of yoga that was being practiced, meditation all the time and not in society. But in this next phase of yoga called the epic stories, that all changed. What happened? We had these great big dramatic stories called the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. And you might have heard of this story, the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata, which means the Great War. And these are great dynastic stories of like battles and demons and warriors, and it's all very soap opera, to be totally honest. And in the Bhagavad Gita, we have a hero, Arjuna. And he's looking out on the battlefield and he's about to go fight this huge, huge battle. And it's a very just battle. It's a battle that needs to be fought, but he's fighting against his own family. So even though he's in the right, he's out there, he says, I'm gonna go out and look. He goes out and he looks around and he sees like, Uncle Ted or whoever over there. And he's like, I don't wanna do this. This is a terrible idea. I'm gonna go and kill all these people that I love. I'm not gonna do it. So Arjuna is a metaphor for this whole leaving society thing. He's like us. He's out there, he's looking at the fray of life, the battlefield of life, and going, I just want to get out of Dodge. I don't want to actually stay and engage in all this stuff. This is terrible. I have to make all of these hard decisions. And that's when Krishna comes in. So Arjuna turns to his charioteer, who is Krishna, a god in disguise, and says, basically, dude, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I just want to throw down. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to engage in this battle. And Krishna is the voice of higher wisdom. So Arjuna is like us, in our daily lives, not sure what to do, trapped between a rock and a hard place, trying to figure out how to make it through this crazy maze. And all we want to do is like throw down the weapons and say, I'm out. And Krishna says, no, wait, there's a better way. Rather than checking out, like all those other meditators were doing, he says, look, you can actually be in life, have the wife, have the cow, be in the huge battle, and still practice yoga. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna lays out these new types of yoga so that yoga can be available to everyone to practice. Now keep in mind, this isn't yoga like physical postural yoga that we do, but this is a yoga about connecting to your deepest, truest self. So the yoga that he lays out, he says, you just go out into your daily life and you do the best that you can and you let go of the results. In other words, you try your hardest, but then you know that that's enough and you can't control everything. That's one kind of yoga that you can do. Another kind of yoga is based in love. If you've ever gone to a kirtan or something where people are chanting and singing, that's kind of an expression of this. It's like just by finding love in everything, loving this flower, loving other people, finding basically God in everything that you see, that's a form of yoga. So all of a sudden, we have yoga available to everybody. So we can still have our wives, our husbands, our cows, our children. We can participate in society and we can practice our yoga in our daily life. Whew, I know, it's a great history, isn't it? So the next thing that happens is that we have something called classical yoga. And basically, this is a refinement of all of those meditation practices that we saw earlier. If you've ever heard of Patanjali or the Yoga Sutra or anything like that, that's where classical yoga comes in. Basically, if we take a step back for a moment and look at the history of India, India is really remarkable because it's a very, very long civilization. It's been around for a tremendously long time. And all of these different philosophies were developing and people were having discourses and creating all these great ideas. And at about the time of classical yoga, these philosophies had become sophisticated enough to become schools of thought. So if you imagine like one philosopher kind of arguing with another one saying like, no, the meaning of life is this because, and they have all of these fancy ideas. That's kind of where we are. We've basically been in this history for long enough for there to be particular schools and they kind of have discourses and argue with each other. So meditation is still a big part of this culture. And in this Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, we see more of the things that we'd recognize from yoga today. You see something called pranayama, which is breath technique. We see asana, which is posture. Now, even though asana, they're still not really doing physical yoga postures, asana is important because it's a meditation seat. So when we just sit in a meditation seat like this, we're doing asana. And we see the concept of meditation really refined and brought to another level. Then there's something that happens called Tantra. So have you heard of Tantra? We have all of these crazy ideas about Tantra. Oh, it's about like sting and sex and things like that. So what happened with Tantra is that Tantra again sort of turned the yoga world on its head. See, in meditation, when I sit in meditation, I'm basically trying to get beyond my own body. So in this style of meditation that Patanjali had, it was like, I'm gonna sit, I'm gonna meditate, and I'm basically gonna get away from it all. Well, Tantra said, hey, rather than you needing to get out of all of this, this is actually the good stuff. In other words, it's similar to the Bhagavad Gita. We don't have to get away from ourselves to practice yoga. We are the yoga. And in fact, everything that you see, it's not something to get away from. It's an expression of the divine incarnate. All of a sudden, Tantra has this beautiful worldview where they look around and they say, the world is actually an expression of the divine, amazing. So now all of a sudden, everything in the world around me, rather than needing to be something that I need to get away from, is something that can be a vehicle for my own liberation, my own self-understanding. So Tantra opened the door to lots of different kinds of practices that used the body in order to understand oneself, in order to connect to God. And that's where shortly after we see something that you're gonna recognize called Hatha Yoga. So because I can use the body, because my body is actually something wonderful, this opened the doorway to doing lots of body practices like asana. And this is where we start to see more and more yoga poses that we would recognize today. Pranayama, breathing techniques, mudras that we see. So this is where you really start to see modern yoga happening. And just to put us on the yoga timeline, this is about the Middle Ages now. So we're almost there. After this, Hatha Yoga starts, and then yoga gets exported out of India. So how that happened? 1898, there was the first Parliament of World Religions in Chicago, and a yoga scholar came over and spoke. And people were fascinated. All of a sudden, people started to perk up and go, what is this thing yoga happening in India? What is that? And that's what started all of this education. So people from India started to come over. And then by the time we get to like the 1960s, remember that counterculture movement? Well, North Americans were really hungry for something which had a little bit more depth of meaning. And so to try to find that depth of meaning, many of them went over to India to study some of this ancient text, to study these ancient philosophies. And then that's when we start to see the modern yoga that we know and love today. We see Ashtanga yoga, we see the rise of Iyengar style yogas, and that's what leads us to all of these power and flow and hatha styles that now we enjoy. So now here, we're still part of this living tradition of yoga that's been going on in many different forms for 6,000 years. So the next time you go into a yoga class and you're practicing your asana or you're having a moment of meditation, just know that you can trace the roots of that back thousands and thousands of years. So there's a little snippet of yoga history. I know it's an exciting whirlwind, but I hope you enjoyed the ride.